Good morning to one and all. My name is Richard Brown. I want to thank you so much for tuning into the Richard Brown Show here on WCOM LP, Chapel Hill and Carver, 103.5 FM. In the studio, I have a wonderful, wonderful guest, and I have an excellent show planned for you today. I want you to sit back and relax, and please, please enjoy. I think it's going to be educational as well as entertaining. I want to take a second to talk just a little bit about what the Richard Brown Show is all about. This show is a space. I continue to use the word space, an expanding space for African Americans to talk about the issues that are facing us. Those that are positive issues as well as negative issues, I think is something that we need to have and continue to bring to the forefront. And so that's what this space is. Today what we'll be talking about, of course, is credit, investing, asset allocation, and building of wealth. But you know, the Richard Brown Show tackles a whole host of issues, and I just believe that a positive space is something that we have to have and continue to grow in order for us as a community to move forward. So I just wanted to share just a second what the Richard Brown Show is all about, and let me thank my guest for coming. Thank you, Mr. Long, for coming on the show today.
Very delighted to be here, and let me commend you on having such a place and a space for African American community to come and share their comments, ideas, and hopefully from this space we can be encouraged to do even better as we look at this whole area of wealth creation for our community.
I completely agree. Let me say first and foremost that wealth creation is something that's very much on my mind. You know, graduating from the institution right down the street, one of the things that I decided to do was get an economics degree, and the reason being is because I felt like there was questions. How do we? What are the steps? You know, how can I?
Right.
You know, have this idea of wealth, and I think sometimes it becomes an idea, and sometimes it becomes a reality. But I think that for me, at this moment, we need to make sure we get what the idea is about.
Right.
And I think that, you know, given the current economic conditions, I think sometimes we get lost in the current now and not look at what is going to happen and what can happen if we position ourselves. So let's talk a little bit about the North Carolina Support Center. Could you tell us what that is and how that feeds into this wealth creation?
Thank you so much. North Carolina Minority Support Center, Richard, was started back about 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in June of this year, we celebrated our 20th year.
Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. Of being service primarily to minority credit unions. We started this journey some 20 years ago, looking at minority credit unions, many of them small, not with much wealth in terms of assets, money-wise, but strong with people assets.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we understand the genesis of credit unions in North Carolina, and in fact throughout this country, they formed because black folks were denied access to credit from mainstream institutions.
Right.
But unfortunately, since we have arrived, so to speak, so we think, we have seen a neglect, if you will, of those financial institutions. But back to this whole issue of the North Carolina Minority Support Center, I had to put that plug in.
Not a problem.
That we formed to provide technical assistance in the form of training, technology, as well as capital support to build the capacity. And there's one important word I always like to use, and that is capacity building. We were trying to build the management capacity of minority credit unions, their institutional capacity to provide capital, the training of staff, as well as looking at capital that will be able to do more lending to their members. Many will know that minority credit unions, our credit unions, are member-owned, and they primarily serve low wealth, low income, and moderate income communities and constituents. So we are pleased with that. Over the years, and it would be sort of remiss on my part if I didn't point out that back in 1989, the North Carolina Legislative Black Caucus did a very historic and red letter thing in terms of the annals of the history of North Carolina policy as related to legislation. They appropriated some $1.7 million to do two things. $1.1 million went to minority credit unions. That is very historic.
That's the seed.
That's the seed money. That's the seed money.
Understood.
Never in the history of this state, in fact of any other state, has a legislative black caucus come together and say we want to do something in our community for our institutions. So 1.1 million went to minority credit union building capacity, and another 600,000 went to community development corporation that spread throughout the state.
Understood.
With the seed of that money, the institutions have grown and have been able to do things that they have not been able to do before. In terms of credit unions, it allowed them to do, for the first time, in a creative way, small business lending. Because community development credit unions primarily have been engaged in consumer loans, auto loans, and to some degree housing loans. But to begin to talk about how do we make access of capital available to our small minority business and women-owned businesses, that was unheard of. So I always, wherever I go, and whenever I have opportunity to speak, I want people to remember the importance of that landmark legislation.
Leadership.
Oh yeah, of the North Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, Representative Mashar, and Representative Dan Blue, and Representative Wainwright, and a number of others. Led that champion, led that fight, and refused to waver.
Right.
So we're pleased with that, and I think since that time, through the leadership of both the House as well as the Senate, on the Senate side with Senator Floyd McKissick leading the charge and helping us, that we have gotten an additional $2.7 million specifically for small business lending for minorities, credit unions to use for small businesses, and that is very important.
Let's put this in some context, because I think that, you know, when people, even in this day and age, when people start throwing around 1.9 million, 2.7 million, they see that lump sum and they start thinking, well, that's a lot of money. Now, number one, it was definitely even more money, more leverage of money, used to think back 10, 15 years ago.
Oh yeah.
But I want us to put it in context of these small rural communities. The Lewisburgs, the Hendersons, the Laurinburgs, the Zebulons of North Carolina, and talk about what's happening in these small rural communities with African Americans trying to scrape and pinch and put together a few dollars because they have an idea, or there's something that they want to do. Connect with me that story with what's happening in Raleigh as they start to say, as they see the need out in the community, and then say, how can we be responsive to that need?
Great. There's two answers to that. One is that you pointed out very vividly that there is great need, and that there are many small businesses and women-owned and minority-owned businesses in those communities who have dreams, who have visions, but lack capital to carry out those visions and dreams. Unfortunately, many of them do not realize what resources are available. For some reason, I say that the credit unions in this state, minority credit unions primarily, as well as Latino credit unions, are sleeping giants, especially in the African American community. We have, I think, know about the big credit unions, the State Employees Credit Union, True Alliance, Coastal Community Credit Unions, all the smaller, larger credit unions. In the scheme of things, $1.1 million doesn't mean much. But when you look at our community and our small businesses who would like capital, who like the credit to get capital from the big banks and the larger